They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put on his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. There are dog lovers, and then there are dog lovers. The other day, I noticed on campus a vehicle, and on the rear end of this vehicle was a number of bumper stickers dedicated to a particular breed of dogs, the Newfoundland, or Newfies, I suppose, as they're sometimes called. Now, as some of you may know, Newfies are big, slightly silly-looking dogs, brown dogs that have a track record of rescuing drowning humans from the water. Now, I know this in part because I remember one bumper sticker from a long time ago that said this: "My Newfie can save your honor student." But now on this car, there was a different Newfie bumper sticker that bumped it up a notch, and this one read, "Your honor student is merely a pawn in my Newfie's diabolical world domination plot." Now, imagine for a moment a world in which today's honor students, along with the best and brightest college students, including Wheaton students, they think that they're on track for eventually running the world, but little do they know that for all their efforts and abilities, they're playing right into the hands, or maybe I should say the paws, of a big furry dog out there who would truly prove to be the ruler of the world. Now, I know it's bizarre and it can make you laugh, and it does make you laugh, but if you think about it, a scenario something like this is playing itself out in the cross of Christ, where the present and future power brokers of the world will be forced to step aside for the most unlikely of world leaders, and that is Jesus Christ himself. When the Roman soldiers take charge of Jesus, they are well aware that he had been claiming to be the Messiah, that is, the long-awaited King of the Jews. But here he was, a lowly Jewish carpenter. He had neither allies nor armies, neither funds nor following. In short, he had nothing at all that would qualify him as a king of the Jews, much less as a serious challenger to Caesar. When they brought this Jesus, who they were about to crucify, they must have been astounded that this Jesus would claim to be king of the Jews. For him to be king of anything would have been preposterous. The very thought of such a powerless man laying claim to the jurisdiction that belonged to the Lord Caesar only made the Roman soldiers laugh. Yet their laughter was not dismissive, but rather angry and vengeful, for they keenly felt the effrontery of Jesus' claim. They wanted to make a public example of him. The only proper punishment for this Jesus was the so-called extreme penalty, death by torture on a Roman cross. The Romans had seen messianic pretenders before, and they knew the drill. When it came to leaders fomenting uprisings, the Romans never did things by half measures. Such individuals need to be put down decisively, violently, and publicly. Now, never let anyone tell you that Jesus was surprised by the cross. After all, he knew as well as anyone what the Romans did with folks who infringed on their turf. We can imagine these Roman soldiers as they took Jesus into custody, nailing him on the cross, lifting him up with his feet about 6 inches from the ground, and then staring tauntingly into his bruised and bloodied face. And we can perhaps even imagine their thoughts, what they said. "Ha, ungrateful lot, these Jews," we can almost hear them say. "Here we provide peace and security, everything they need, and now here's another power-hungry but ultimately weak Jew stirring up trouble again. Well, we'll show him just like the others." Already jaded by years of experience in putting down religiously inspired uprisings and convinced that Jesus' piety was only a pretext for yet another power grab, and for the Romans, power was all that mattered, the soldiers must have been enraged by what they saw as a big game. And so in anger, they strike him again and again and again. In scorn, they spit on him. Finally, they crucify him. And the whole time, they mock him. And what an elaborately staged mocking it was. Think about it. When Tiberius took the throne less than 20 years earlier, on his head they put a delicately wrought crown. On his shoulders they lay a purple mantle. Into the emperor's hands they put a scepter. And then the legions and the populace would fill the streets of Rome and cry out together in a loud voice, "Hail Caesar, Emperor, Savior of the world!" Meanwhile, those immediately surrounding the enthroned Caesar would fall on their knees and pay homage. Now, back in Palestine, in Mark's story, the Roman soldiers are summoning all their creative energies to mimic the Roman ascension to power. One of the soldiers takes time to weave across a crown of thorns and probably pricks his hand once or twice in the process. Someone else goes off and finds a nearby purple robe. Perhaps a third soldier went off to find Jesus his scepter. You see, it was a team effort. They all worked together in creating a first-century street drama open to the public and involving all the elements of a king's coronation. In this particular drama, Jesus was forced to play the role of the emperor, taking his throne as dominator of the world, and the soldiers themselves played the emperor's loyal subjects. Hail, King of the Jews. The moment the soldiers seated Jesus on the cross and then nailed him down was the moment of his enthronement. The Roman soldiers were casting Jesus in their own drama. Now, of course, they wouldn't be the first to do that, nor would they be the last. All along, it's so ironic, little did the Roman soldiers know that in pretending to enthrone Jesus on the make-believe throne, the Son of God was actually taking his rightful place as ruler of the universe. In the reality of Rome, it was always Caesar who would get the final word. But in the reality of God, Jesus gets the final word by taking his rightful place on the throne, putting sin and death under his feet once for all, as well as every principality, ruler, and authority that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. In the final calculus of the cross, Caesar's well-honored henchmen were but pawns in a preordained divine and world domination plot. All along, it was God's hidden plan to transfer power from the rulers of this world to the true ruler and creator of the world, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Little could anyone anticipate that God's mysterious means for accomplishing this was the Roman cross. This spring here at Wheaton, we have been reminded of death with the loss of a dear one in our community. We've been reminded, too, of our fallen proclivity to sin. And yet, far be it from us to suppose that only the sins that matter are the kinds of sins that make the pages of the Wheaton Record or the Chicago Tribune. For the most pernicious of sins of all are those dark, unrecorded thoughts that dwell deep within the recesses of all our hearts. But the cross speaks to our hearts. The cross speaks to our secularism, just as it spoke to the secularism of the Roman soldiers. The soldiers thought that they had the final word on Jesus, and that Jesus' fate ultimately hung on their decision to exert or hold back the iron fist of Roman power. As it became clear soon enough, they were wrong. It would be Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, who would get the final word. And whoever gets the final word is also the one who provides the final explanation of reality. Real power, the cross tells us, is not the exertion of political muscle or brute force or coercive appeal to the opinion of masses or to manipulative words. Real power is in weakness. When the secular world takes its cues from its most honored students of power, we take our cue from the ones whom the Romans considered a crucified dog. We take our cues from Jesus Christ crucified. The cross also speaks to our cynicism. As we, in our postmodern condition, tend to make a virtue of withdrawing from life's more noble causes and consigning ourselves to an aloof state of ironic detachment, as we call that which is beautiful corny and that which is true but a convenient truth, as our only real commitment is to remain uncommitted and uninvested, we begin to find that much like the Roman soldiers, we end up reducing Jesus Christ to being a comedic actor in the drama of our lives. We hail him as Lord, but we don't mean it. We kneel before him, but we don't worship him. We offer him the staff of authority and say, Lord, Lord, but we end up hitting him on the head instead. Like ticket holders sitting in the last row of the balcony, we see ourselves not as actors, but as observers only. And why do we do this? Because we've become jaded by our experience of sin. And we don't believe that the power of God is able to prevail against human evil as we've witnessed it in others as well as ourselves. We don't believe that God has the power to take the tragedy of life and turn it toward his redemptive purposes. And so in our fierce dedication to personal autonomy, we resist participation on the stage of his unfolding mission. But when we contemplate the cross, we contemplate the fact that God somehow managed to take human evil at its very worst and turn it toward salvation at its very best. The cross, you see, is evidence A that God intends to put us to work despite all our messiness and all our imperfection and despite all human adversity, to put us to work in such a way that no power at all can thwart the purposes of God. Finally, when we contemplate the cross, we contemplate the fact that even though the Roman soldiers thought that they were only the audience, they were in fact as much involved in God's unfolding drama as anyone. As there were no innocent bystanders on the day of Jesus' death, so too there are no dispassionate parties today. There is no neutral ground. Today, the world, much like the Roman soldiers, continues to demote Jesus by casting him in their own drama on their own terms. We shouldn't be surprised by this. The question is whether you believe there's another drama going on behind the scenes. And if there is, are you part of that drama? In short, do you believe that when Jesus Christ was crucified, he was crucified for you and your sin? In the words of a well-known poem of Horatius Bonar, "'Twas I that shed the sacred blood. I nailed him to the tree. I crucified the Christ of God. I joined the mockery. Of all the shouting multitude, I feel that I am one. And in that din of voices rude, I recognize my own. Around the cross, the throng I see, mocking the sufferer's groan. Yet still my voice it seems to be, as if I mocked alone. There are those who love the cross of Christ, and there are those who love the cross of Christ. Somehow the latter can always say, yet still my voice it seems to be, as if I mocked alone."